You can see Petty Officer Lewison. So who's ready for an adventure? Welcome aboard, shipmates. This is Real Sailors, Real Sea Stories, a training program created for the Naval Sea Cadet Corps by our supporters and friends at the Navy Talent Acquisition Group in Philadelphia. I'm your host, Warrant Officer David Sheets, Commanding Officer of the John T. Dempster Jr. Division of the Naval Sea Cadet Corps. I am joined today by our all-Navy support crew of NC-1 Quinlan, who's our PAO, and STG-1 Lewison, who is our Technical Support Director. Today's topic is the highly dangerous but very demanding world of Navy flight deck operations. Cadets, you are really going to enjoy this, so strap in. Here we go. Today's presenter is Petty Officer Second Class Brendon Ritchie. So, cadets, this is active learning, not passive listening. I hope you have a lot of questions as we go through today's presentation. When you do, just like every other episode, put your questions in the comment section and we'll work them into the presentation. In addition, after the presentation is over, you will receive a link to our quiz. Our quiz will be a 2-day quiz. 2-hour quiz would be brutal. So it'll be active for 2 days. So go in there, fill out this online quiz, and receive 2 hours of virtual drill credit. So enough about that. So let's get on with the show. Petty Officer Ritchie, the ship is all yours.
Thank you, sir. First, it's a pleasure to be here, and I want to thank everybody for taking the time out of their day to be here and listen to my story. So to introduce myself, like he said, my name is Petty Officer Ritchie. I'm originally from Toledo, Illinois. I've been in the Navy for a little over 6 years. Originally from, like I said, Toledo. You still there, sir? You connected?
Yes, we're here, all live, ready to go.
Okay, thank you. So originally, like I said, I've been in the Navy for about 6 years now. I joined out of Norfolk, Virginia. The reason why I joined, I wanted to set myself up for a future and follow my dad's footsteps. For starters, so I graduated high school. Went to college, trying to get a degree in criminal justice. I actually got in a little bit of trouble, and I ended up having to drop out and get a job. There wasn't much going on in Southern Illinois, so I actually took a trip out to my dad's house. He told me to save some money. I can move out to Virginia, get a fresh start. So I ended up saving like $2,500 roughly. Moved out to Virginia. Within the first couple of weeks, I actually got a job in a factory, Cintas. Was working there for 5 to 6 months. Didn't really have much of a career path. So when my dad when he got back from deployment, I actually sat down with him and actually asked different questions about the Navy because he was a recruiter in Pittsburgh at one point of his career. So eventually we went into the recruiting office and set up an appointment, and here I am today. So I went to boot camp in 2013. Started out as the pay grade of E1. Before I graduated, I actually advanced to pay grade of E3. There's different ways you can advance in boot camp. The first one is passing your first initial physical assessment tests and the study of materials. So advanced through that, and then actually took a leadership role in boot camp as a ship staff RPOC. So basically, like the cleaning crew for the barracks. And at the end of boot camp, I was actually promoted to E3 before going to A school.
So, Petty Officer Ritchie, one of the cadets are asking, and this maybe is obvious because of your dad's experience, and let's talk about that a little bit. But why did you choose the Navy over other branches? So, just because your father was in the Navy, it doesn't necessarily mean that would be the course that you would take.
Right. Yeah. So like I mentioned, I didn't have much, as a career path, outside of the military. So when I was starting to look, nothing really stood out to me. Just because when I was talking to my dad, he told me all the benefits and stuff like that. Because ultimately, I wanted to set myself up for a future, family. I was 20 at the time, but I was trying to look, down the road of what would be beneficial. So when he basically sold me like a recruiter that he once was, and that initially, gave me the foot to begin the process of the Navy. Even though I couldn't swim at the beginning. So I did all my, swimming in boot camp. I've always been, pretty tall. So I've always been able to touch the ground. I never had to really swim. So I definitely got the swimming education down in up in Great Lakes.
So yeah, that's pretty impressive that you didn't know how to swim before you went into the Navy. I guess you knew that was kind of one of the things that we would have to do, right?
Yeah, it was one of those things again. Like it was, I knew going in, it was going to be a challenge. Never jumped off a diving board. I couldn't, in the water, I couldn't touch. So when it came to that part, I actually got pushed in. The first time
Awesome.
I swam up, they stuck me with the little pole, and had to pull you out. But they gave me some lessons, to flap your hands, the feet, get up, and I eventually got to it. Did the prone float in a 5-minute. Tread water, and eventually I did pass, but I didn't get set back or anything like that.
Yeah, that's pretty impressive. Actually, I've been to that facility. It's the USS Indianapolis. Is that what you're talking about?
Yes,
so
sir. It's just pretty much. It's like an Olympic-sized pool.
It's massive. So with your dad's experience with that, was there any, say, advantages or disadvantages you thought when you entered recruit training? Because I'm sure he shared his own sea stories with you. Like, back when I went to boot camp, this is what it was like.
Yeah, I mean, he did give me some insights and, what to do, what not to do. The biggest thing was to listen to what, what's being instructed and stuff like that. But when it came to the ship, side story, I was going to pick up on this shortly, but I actually got stationed on the same ship as my dad for about 3 years until he retired. So we actually did a deployment together. We went to Italy, Bahrain, Dubai, France, and some other, those were the countries that we went to. So I actually got the chance to explore Rome with him, for free, essentially on the Navy's dime, just for being stationed on the same ship. So that was pretty neat as well.
Oh, cool. So I guess we'll get into that a little bit more, but yeah, excellent. So, all right. So you're recruit training, you're in Great Lakes. Then what happened?
So after that, went to A school down in Pensacola. It's where all the aviation rates are. So all the ABEs, ABHs, Fs, some other rates. So went down to Pensacola. The course is only 3.5, 4 weeks long. At the time, there was a government shutdown, so we kind of got put on hold to class up. But I graduated the A school in July of 2013. And since then, I reported to the USS Dwight D. Eisenhower. They were actually in the shipyard. So my first 5 years that I have been in, I would say 3.5, 4 years. I was not fully 4 years, but we were in the shipyards the entire time. So I got there, they were in the shipyards, they were dry docked. We were there for a year. We came out August of 2015, did the workups and everything like that. We went on deployment June of 2016, got back New Year's Eve. We came back, did like the work downs. We actually went to Canada to celebrate their version of, I don't remember the name off the top of my head, but it's basically like their Independence Day. So we went up to Canada for a full week, celebrated the stuff with them, came back, did ammo offloads, and next thing you know, we went back into the shipyards, and I wrote out the rest of my contract there at, in the shipyards until I came here to Intag, Philadelphia.
Okay, very cool.
So the best thing about my job, she went too far. So the best thing about my job is knowing what we do makes a difference and helps the boots on the ground. So we'll get a little bit more into it, but so the ABEs, they essentially launch the aircraft and recover them. So when they launch these aircraft off the flight deck, they are supplied with bombs and everything else like that. So every day they have different missions that they go through. They have to operate. They and helping the boots on the ground. So when they're fighting overseas and stuff like that, know the fact that we launched the aircraft that might save them down the range is definitely a good little feeling. Top Navy memory, visiting Rome, which I mentioned, seeing different historical artifacts, meeting Tim Tebow and Marty Smith. which I'll show here in the next slide. Next. So there on the left there, that's me and my dad. The ship actually did a little article about us. We'll see it on the next one. So that is, I think, within the first couple of months that I was there reporting to the USS Dwight D. Eisenhower. In the center, I was actually TAD to San Diego for a full month. The USS Carl Vinson, they needed ABEs, H's, and F's to come out them and help support them do a RIMPAC mission. So when we were going out there, it was also happened to be a Veterans Day. So Tim Tebow, ESPN, they came out, did one of their ESPN specials. Came out, we got to actually meet them in the mess deck, set up on the flight deck. They gave some nice speeches and stuff like that. And on the right, it's just me operating one of our arresting gear engines and the computer systems that go along with that. Next. So here on the left here, a couple pictures. One is from, you see Paris in the background when we went to France. The other is the Colosseum in Rome. That's a Ferris wheel over in Rome as well. The right is there is the article I just mentioned. Nothing too big, just a little bit of, how we ended up on the same ship together and stuff like that. So one of the things that ABEs, when you're in your...
Just completely by chance that the two of you ended up on the same ship?
A little,
or does he have pull because he's a chief and chief knows how to do everything?
No, it wasn't nothing like that. The ABEs in A school, when you first get there, they basically tell you you're going to take this first exam, and based off how well you do is how you get to pick your command. So if you say 20 people in the test, I think we had 22 in our class. I scored like a 93, 94. But I still ended up picking like 16th, 17th in order. So ultimately I wanted to go to Seattle. I wanted to go West Coast. I was already living on the East Coast, wanted to go out there. So when the time came down to me, there was nothing West. It was all Norfolk, Virginia. So there was the Eisenhower, there was I think the Truman and a few others. So when it came down to it, I asked to see if it was an option, just to see, because I know, way back when there was the historical thing where all the brothers died in Pearl Harbor and stuff like that. But they said it was allowed just because he is a FC on the surface side, and then I would have been on aviation. So when it came down to it, and when it came down to me, I should say, I went ahead and picked the orders to the Ike and just kind of see if I can get that experience with him. Because growing up, backstory, I actually ended up living with my mom when my parents separated. So he joined the Navy was to support me. So always, like I said, I lived in Toledo, Illinois, which is about 2 hours east of St. Louis. So always grew up kind of distant from him. So took that advantage to, get a little bit of time with him that I missed.
That's really great. That is really great. And it all worked out. Perfect.
It did work out. Yeah, so I mean, it was. I've seen him around the ship a decent amount of times. There were a lot of people I would say knew who I was because he already established himself. He was already on the ship for like 2 years before I got there. So there would be times where I'd be walking up and down the P-ways, and people in his raids, his shop would, like, hey, little Ritchie, how's it going, and stuff like that. I'd see him in P-ways, but I'd still have to address him as chief and stuff like that. But there'd be random times, he'd come check on me, see how I'm going, how I'm doing in the job, and stuff like that until eventually he retired. He retired in 2017 at 21 years.
Great. And, that's not exactly what there's a similar experience in the Sea Cadet Corps where a lot of the cadets, their, parents are involved in one way, shape, or form. So you have to be distant, right, in order to be professional. You can't just act like, it's your son or your daughter. It's just another cadet or another sailor. But there is a little something where you can share a moment or two, and that's kind of special.
For sure. Yeah. Like I said, in the P-ways, everything was professional and stuff like that. But there was the times where he'd come check in to see how things were going. And, so we got to experience Rome together through the MWR tours. But then he actually, like I mentioned, we went into the shipyards after the fact. So he actually got sent back with a shipyard planning team. So he actually only did, I want to say 4 or 5 months of the deployment. So he didn't catch the full thing as I did. But definitely had some ups and downs for sure. Next slide. So again, here's some extra photos from some Rome, Paris, and the Vatican and stuff like that. Next slide.
Real quick about Rome and
Yes.
Paris. Where did you pull into port? Because this is the Eisenhower, right?
Yes, sir.
You don't just show up with the Eisenhower. You
correct.
have to go somewhere.
So Italy, we actually docked in Naples. For Italy, they had a port big enough for us to pull in, so we were there for 4 days. Rome, we actually had to take a train to get to Rome. Same thing for Paris, actually. You hop on a train and they take you into Rome. You spend a day up there. You get there like midday, and then we stay in a hotel that night with people that you check out with. The next day, you do some of the historical tours and stuff like that, and then we went back to the ship the following day. The same thing with where are we at here? Yeah, the same thing with the Vatican. It's part of those tours as well. When it came to Paris, we docked down in Marseille. They didn't have a port big enough, so we actually docked out a little bit off the piers, and we'd actually have to take tugboats onto the island, or the country, I should say, to get back and forth. Next slide. So, Aviation's boatswain mate was established as a rating in 1944, encompassing aviation boatswain mate launching, recovery equipment, the ABFs, the fuels, and the H's, which is the handling. Aviation boatswain mates, launch and recovery equipment operate. We maintain and perform maintenance on steam catapults, barricades, and resting gear, and associated equipment ashore and afloat, which we'll see in some of the videos after this. Next slide.
Oh, just real quick about that. Back to ABE school, right? So what was that like for any of our cadets who are interested? Because I can see through some of the discussions here that there are few that are interested in the aviation component, right? So because we're talking about shipboard, we're talking about aviation, and we'll get to submarines later in the series. But what was A school like as far as like the trainings that you had to do, and just you went from boot camp straight to Pensacola, so. I mean, it's a change in scenery and a change of expectations.
Yes, sir. So it's really a classroom setting. All the different rates are down there. Aviation rates are down there. It's a 4-week course. The first week they teach you about the basic fundamentals of the flight decks, 3M, which is maintenance and stuff like that. The next couple of weeks, so ABEs are actually there's 2 different tiers. So we have the catapults and then the arresting gear. So they spend some time teaching you a little bit about the arresting gear. They teach you a little bit about the catapults. But when you actually get to the ship, it pretty much puts you in the needs of the rate. So we actually one of the bigger rates on a aircraft carrier, anywhere from 250 to 300 people, just in our job alone, because you have 2 separate crews, like mentioned, catapults and arresting gear. But down in Pensacola, there are some Marines and some Air Force down there because it is a pretty big base. But as far as the training, most of it's classroom setting. They do some firefighting, later in the courses, shipboard firefighting. That's where you start the basic fundamentals of teamwork for firefighting and stuff like that. Because when you do get to a ship, there's constant drills, constant damage control drills, firefighting, shipboard stuff, aircrafts, and stuff like that.
Hey, great. Thank you.
You're welcome. So what do I do as an ABE? So like I mentioned, maintain, perform organizational maintenance on hydraulic and steam catapults, barricades, arresting gear, and arresting gear engines. The other side, operate catapults, launch and arrest consoles, firing panels, water brakes, blast effectors, and cooling panels. Perform aircraft handling duties related to the operation of launching and recovering naval aircraft. Next. So here's a video for the catapult side of ABE2.
You can smell the JP5, the jet exhaust. It smells like speed. I don't think ever before in my life you see so much happening in front of you at once. It's violent, it's scary, and I still get nervous.
An ABE is comprised of primarily two groups. You have a catapult crewman and you have an arresting gear crewman. I happen to be part of the catapult group.
When an aircraft launches off the flight deck, it's craziest combining of mechanical craziness. I mean, you're taking an aircraft that weighs so much and you're literally slingshotting it off of a boat.
That's insane up there. Insane. Insane. You wouldn't believe it though. Like once you think up, it's crazy. It gets crazy up there. Insane.
All the magic happens below decks. Underneath the flight deck is a more technical experience. That's where you really learn the technical side of the rate.
And that's where I observe all the gauges, where I watch all the lights.
404, wind 10.
Troubleshooting everything that's going on.
Downstairs, they're making sure that all their information matches up. At the same time, when the officer's matching up his stuff, if we come to an agreement with the shooter's permission, we get to launch the aircraft.
Not only we maintain the equipment, but we actually utilize the equipment ourselves, which makes us kind of a unique rate.
Make sure that we have all the 10 boats. Make sure we got the pinning. Come over here, check the safety net.
We typically do the maintenance on the jet blast deflectors. F-18 that's fully throttled up. It can't last more than 45 seconds until they're actually fully cooked.
Seeing them also recover as well. You know, like one thin wire that is cooled up inside the ship is stopping that entire aircraft.
You have people manned up in every single station ensuring that specific wire is ready for taking a trap.
This ship can sail somewhere and put 70 of the most lethal aircraft in the world in their airspace. And the people that make that happen as safely and efficiently as possible is us.
Yes. So that video there is more on the the version of the catapults side of our rate. The next video here is actually going to be more aligned to what my side, the arresting gear side. MC1, if you can go ahead and play the second video.
How you doing? I'm ABE2 James Seward from USS Theodore Roosevelt, V2 arresting gear.
Check it. Go on to it. That gear set.
Move.
Short.
Ramp.
On a day-to-day basis, we recover $1 million aircraft with an 1 7/16 diameter cable. It stops an aircraft from roughly about 200 miles an hour to zero in the size of what is most people's yards. We consider ourselves the hardest working and the dirtiest people on the ship. Reason for that is because we deal with so much grease and so much preservative and so much lubricant. And on top of that, we also deal with all the aircraft on the flight deck, whether it be the when they land, the little pieces that come off the tires, or the non-skid, and all the grease that we use with all of the cables to keep them from rusting and keep our equipment up and running for a day-to-day basis. We can fly anywhere from 12 hours a day to 20 hours a day. It's not uncommon for us to do 20-hour-day operations. And then when we man down, we have to do maintenance, turn around, get everything back up, and then man back up again, be ready to recover aircraft. It takes a while to do what we do, physically and emotionally. You get a sense of appreciation for what everybody does, for you and the people that work around you, and a sense of pride for being able to push your body and your mind through the day-to-day operations and everything else on top of it to be able to have 4 wires on the floor, recovering aircraft, and turn around and come home safe. It's definitely takes a lot out of a person. And sorry,
That's fine.
no, I'm looking back like the past. So, you know, you get the reward just from the people that you work with. We don't really get recognized a lot by the ship, but definitely the people that we work for, that right there.
Where my dogs at? Where my dogs at?
Thank you, Mr. Ron. Next slide. Yeah, so here's a couple extra photos pulled from the videos and online and stuff. As you see, top left corner, grease. So they talked about it. It can be a very greasy, dirty job, and most of the work is performed, outdoors on the flight deck, in all climate conditions, rain, sleet, snow. It's very fast paced for sure. Excuse me. So like one of the resting gear, he mentioned aircraft coming in. They do come in anywhere from 160 to 200 miles per hour, and we stop them in a length of about 400 feet. 3 football fields in roughly 3 seconds. The equipment we use is very technical. There's it's got a lot more computerized since the first aircraft carriers and stuff like that. So when each weight has a certain weight limit, that we use a computer system to basically use this closing system with all the fluid. Basically, the heavier aircraft and the lighter aircraft all stop at the same point on the flight deck, 2 to 3 seconds. It's pretty quick.
To me, it's just like awestruck, and it's really a shame that that one video clip was saying that people don't appreciate it. With my aviation background, I absolutely appreciate it. I mean, especially with the arresting gear, if that doesn't work, it's over, right? I mean, it's incredibly unforgiving to any mistakes. So if you wouldn't mind, like, if you could bring us back to, say, the first time you were up on the flight deck, because A school's one thing, right? But like the first time you were out there, like what was it like? How did it feel?
To be honest, it was very nerve-wracking because before they even they take you up to flight deck, they take you up to Vulture's Row, which is the tower that you see in the center picture here on the left-hand side of the airplane. So they actually take you up there, and they will actually let you see the flight operations before you even take a step on there, because they don't want you up there unless you're comfortable. So not when there's not any flight operations, you'll go up there, you'll learn the different lines, where to go, where the escape routes are, and stuff like that. Because like you said, it's one of the top 5 most dangerous jobs in the world. Just everything in general. So the first time up there was actually during night operations, because I actually was on part of our maintenance crew. So at night, it's middle of the ocean. It's pitch black. So the only thing you see, if you got a bright moon, that's going to be your best source of light. However, there are lights on that island. But when you're overseas, there's times where you got to do stuff in pitch black. But during the operations, you feel the jets rumbling. The jet blast deflectors, which is again on that center photo there, behind the guy underneath the airplane. So when the jets start up, they're in full throttle before they get catapulted off. So those JBDs there deflect all of that, that power, that thrust from those aircraft. But you can still feel the rumbling, down, in the middle of the ship. It's that loud. And whenever we do catch the aircraft, they actually had people come out with some decimal readers, and the sound of the engines inside the engine rooms are almost up to 125 decibels, which is like super, super loud. So it comes down to, there's a lot of safety that comes into it. Is to see the cranials there, to cover the ears and stuff like that. You still put earplugs on in the inside, but up top for me personally, it was definitely nerve wracking for the first couple of times until you get comfortable of where to go, where not to step. And then when there's props up in the air, So the Hawkeyes, they have actual sprinting props, which it sounds like they call it the bumblebees. But you don't want to go anywhere near that. So there's a lot that you have to learn before you even take those first steps up there. But once you get up there, it's definitely nerve-wracking. They say never get comfortable, but you can get comfortable sometimes. But you always got to keep your head on the swivel, and, keep in check.
So then, how do they get you prepared for this? So yeah, like I said, you're looking down from the crow's nest. You're looking around, but there's a difference between watching it and doing it. Are you teamed up with people? Even like with the ear protection, how do you know what to do or where to look? Because there's so much happening all the time. You have to be constantly aware. There's no down moment, I'm sure. Right? So how do you do that?
Yeah, there is no down moment. You're constantly being vigilant and looking around. When you do go up there, you go up with a special cross on the back of your cranial. Basically says you're in training per se. So you basically will be right next to someone that's been up there for a while and just asking questions and going through the different steps and again like where to go, where not to go. But before all that, because there's different qualifications. So when you're up there, you're actually training for a specific qualification. So you already know a little bit about it, just off the paper, studying it and stuff like that. But when you get up there, it's real. You got to train. You have to train. There's no, it's not something that you do behind your computer desk or something like that. So when you're up there, you're doing it, live, in time. So there's no room for mess ups. But again, it comes down to you're basically shadowing someone for a good amount of time until you get comfortable to be able to do the stuff on your own on day-to-day operations.
Okay. So considering how challenging and difficult and potentially dangerous, well, actually dangerous that it is, any close calls?
So I personally, in 2016, we went on, like I mentioned, we went on deployment in June. So 2 months before that, you actually go out on a month-long COM2X, would basically do all of these elevated trainings as if you were overseas. Within the first couple of days, I was down, manned up on one of the engines. There's 4 wires. I was manned up on the 3-wire, which is the most caught wire, the most productive one. It wasn't too long into the flight operations. A Hawkeye was actually coming in. You can find all the videos on YouTube, but the aircraft came in, pulled the wire, everything seemed normal until it didn't. The wire actually snapped on the flight deck while the aircraft was coming in. The aircraft was able to, the aircraft went off the flight deck, and the tires actually touched the water, but the pilots were able to save the aircraft. But on the back side of that, when that wire snapped, think of it as like a rubber band. As soon as that wire snapped and got disconnected, it flung back to its original, point and destination. It actually did hurt some people. The aircraft, there were some aircraft that got damaged. But like I said, I was below when it all happened. But there was a couple days where I went in lockdown. We didn't do any more flight operations for a couple days. There was big investigations and stuff like that. But they had to medevac a couple people off. So it's definitely, like I mentioned, one of the most dangerous jobs for sure. That's really the only big experience that I had that ended up a bad memory from my rate. But other than that, the people you meet and everything, the job itself is very technical and labor incisive. But that'll be the one memory that I have, sir.
So I have actually seen that video of the Hawkeye. It goes right off the angled flight deck, and it disappears, and then it just reappears, right? So that was amazing airmanship and a lot of good training in place. But at the same time, so when this cable snapped, I would assume that's not a common occurrence, but did they come down to what the root cause of that is, and did they have to make any changes because of that incident?
Yeah, so the cable itself is there on the bottom right corner of the screen. It's pressured, if I remember right, it's 120,000 pounds per square inch, which is a lot. But when it came down to the investigation, it was just simply a malfunction of the equipment. This is when, like I mentioned earlier, the aircraft went more to a technical. All these equipments went more to technical computer-based systems. So they've never. The system are using this was the first time, and I want to say 6-7 years since all this stuff came out that this has ever happened. When they did the investigations, it wasn't no human error or anything like that. It was just a simple malfunction of the equipment. Basically, like I said earlier, there's a lot of these engines are ran through. It's like fluid. It's all like fluid flows and stuff like that. So whenever someone pushes in an aircraft coming in, there's certain parameters. Almost think of it like a plunger in a toilet. So whenever it punches in, as soon as a wire gets engaged by an aircraft, the plunger, essentially closes down and stops it moving the fluid, which then stops the aircraft. So, and I'm talking that these decimals are like thousands of inches for each aircraft. So it could have been one little decimal somewhere where basically it didn't close all the way and allowed fluid to continue to move through the system, which then in turn the cable didn't have that stopping force on the tail hooks of the aircraft. So when it came to it, it's meant to break at a certain point, and it reached that point to where that cable actually just ended up snapping.
Okay, all right. I'm looking at some of the comments from our cadets, and actually there's one petty officer, second class Bello, who just chimed in, so I'll give him a shout out here. He says that his dad is a retired ABCM, right? And he's saying that his father is saying that the ABs actually run the flight deck. Is that true? There's an ego there, but it's probably a lot of truth there.
I mean, everyone has their own inputs on everything. We can't launch the aircraft unless the aircraft get fueled by the ABFs, and the aircraft don't get in positions unless the ABHs move the aircraft where they're supposed to. But ultimately, the point of the aircraft carry is to launch and recover jets and stuff like that to wherever they have to go. So I mean, essentially, you could say we were taking what he said. We kind of do run the flight deck because of what what our job is, but we definitely don't get there without the help of the other rates. Because not only that, if you think outside of the aviation side, you have operations inside the ship that are constantly planning routes for the jets to go ships. We have weathermen who give the reports to the commanding officers and stuff like that. They steer the ships in certain directions so that the aircraft can launch, because they're not going to launch them in the middle of a rainstorm somewhere out in the middle of the ocean. So they're going to deter the ship to go different directions for this to happen. So it's essentially one big team, one effort type of thing. But these aircraft can't do what they're supposed to do unless our equipment's up and running.
And based on that previous comment, yeah, there's pride in your job, right? There has to be pride in your job, especially what you're doing, right? You have to be motivated. You have to, be focused on it, and again, be very excited about what you're doing. But your point's 100% right. It's not just one individual. I mean, that's kind of the laughable point when those of us who are watching something like Top Gun. Good movie, right? Good movie. But it's not just the one pilot. It's thousands of team members working together to make that one event happen, right? And especially what you're talking about with your rating, if you can't launch it, you can't recover it, then there's no mission, right? But that's just one piece of the giant orchestration that it takes to get the power projection that we're looking for with the carrier. So it's amazing stuff.
Yes, it really is, because for the catapult side, so all the stuff, the steam, they don't get the steam unless you got the nuclear, all the nukes down in the bottom of the ship, producing all the energy and stuff like that. So that's the catapults are steam operated. There is the USS Gerald Ford, they're working on the electromagnetic version of everything, but all the other ships, the other 10 aircraft carriers operate through steam. Again, it comes down to one team, one fight. For sure.
So the arresting gear, they're just hydraulics. How do they work? Because they're not steam, right? So
yeah, it is. It's all hydraulics and a bunch of pulleys. computers, electronics, and fluids. It's one big. Think of it like a actual vehicle. You know, you have fluids that move to different parts of the engine to do certain things. So in that second video there, it's a huge machine. It's about 50 feet long with all the cable inside of it. And there's what we call a ram, an MEC, which basically holds all this fluid, 520 some gallons of fluid. They get pushed through the system that pushes different parts of the system to do with it, the pulleys and stuff like that. But essentially, whenever the aircraft comes down, touches the wire, that's what makes everything move. So even if the aircraft's not pulling the wire, I think you might have saw in some of the videos there, we have the little tractors that they hook up the tail hook to the wire to pull it down the deck for like when we're doing maintenance and stuff like that. Our equipment doesn't move unless it's either by the tractor or the an aircraft coming in, and that's when all the magic happens.
Oh, okay, that makes sense. So with all this coordination happening, how are you all coordinated as a single team for each recovery, right? Because there's aircraft landing all the time, and there's sailors doing a variety of different tasks on the deck in preparation for that landing. So in your raid in particular, who coordinates that? I mean, is there like one group? It can't just be 40 individuals doing their own thing. It has to be a huge team sport.
Yes, sir. So we're broken down to different elements inside. So there is someone that sits up at the top of the tower with the air boss who oversees all air operations. So with all of that, they have what type of aircraft are coming in, how many in each setting. So we're all in the top right corner. You see how they have headphones on with the piece. So we all relay through messages through these headsets. So when an aircraft is coming in, they coordinate to us to set the engines to a specific aircraft. And he actually is the first one, because when you're down below decks, you don't see any of these aircraft coming in. You're going based off what you hear, and you're trusting the words of the people that's above you. So if he says an aircraft's coming in at certain weight, whatever, that's how we know. When the aircraft's coming in, there's someone on deck edge was at the end of the ship, so they're actually kind of also help spotting and relaying the messages down to the engines when aircraft's coming in. You might have heard the second video when they said groove short ram. That's kind of a heads up for us to know when an aircraft's coming in. Because these engine rooms, they're open as well. So you have people walking up and down the P-ways on the sides of the engine rooms. So whenever they yell groove, we yell groove. So it gives other personnel like inside the ship, basically a heads up that aircraft's coming in. Because like I mentioned earlier, it's super, super loud. It'll make your head turn if you don't have some type of protection or anything. Your head will turn sideways because of how loud it is and how much it screeches. But like you said, there are different elements. There's the engine operator, then you have a port side and a starboard side shift damper who operate one of the different pulleys. The person in the back, deck edge, and then you have the flight deck crew that works up top. You have one person in charge. There's a person who is at the very top where the aircraft lands. So as soon as the aircraft lands, he works with the ABEs. It's all hand signals, because you're not going to be able to talk and communicate on the flight deck with how loud everything is. So you do learn different hand signals to coordinate with other rates and stuff like that. So when the aircraft lands, he gives certain signals to the H's, and they are looking at the pilots. So when they get the message, they relay it to the pilot to do certain things, either move the tail hook up, start to move the aircraft, and then in turn, once the aircraft is moved, the person up top, you will actually give again another hand signal to the people at the back of the ship to basically retract the wire. And then you have two people who use these big, almost like push bar, we call them push bars, to help guide the wire when it comes back, so it's not looking like a scribbly wire coming back. You just want to keep it away from other personnel, because you don't want to get caught by the wire and do a backflip or anything like that when it hits your feet.
Okay, so I mean that's an incredible amount of motion happening, right? But how frequent does it have to happen? Because aircraft are landing, at some interval. I don't know if it's every 2 minutes or whatever the time is. So there is constant activity going on here during flight ops.
Yep. Yes, sir. So if you're talking just one aircraft in general, as soon as it lands, you can get it set back up to launch within under 2 minutes, like you mentioned. But they do different sets of intervals. Sometimes it could be 10 aircraft at once, 15. You could do where we're doing a constant qualification where they're just coming in and landing. There's been times where an aircraft comes in, lands, retract the wire. So whenever they land, I mentioned earlier, they land anywhere from 2 to 4 seconds. The amount of time for the wire to come back into its standby position is anywhere from 15 to 18 seconds. And in turn there, we can actually land an aircraft directly after that, as soon as the aircraft is moved out of the runway. So there's been times where you could land probably 2 aircraft in, I would say, under a minute and a half, as long as everything is going to good. Everything gets set back to standby, and the flight deck officers give the green light. From the tower, you could land multiple aircraft, within a few minutes. As soon as everything gets back in the standby mode.
Wow, that's really impressive. I mean, just all of that motion, and it's all coordinated. Everybody knows what they're doing, right? So when something goes wrong, then what? Like, for example, the deck is not cleared, or there's something wrong with the arresting gear or something like that. How does that communicate to whoever in order to stop the process, wave somebody off, do something like that? Because it's one thing noticing that there's a problem, but you have this pilot coming barreling down at 200 miles an hour. You don't want them to try to land at that point. So what happens, and how is your team involved with that? Right.
So if the flight deck is not cleared, at the back of the ship, like I mentioned, there's on the left-hand side, there's going to be the deck edge operators, which is us. On the right-hand side, you're going to have officers and what we call B0, who help the officers run some of the operations. So if anything happens down below decks, if there's some type of error on the computer, any something that we're not able to fix before the next aircraft lands, we relay the message up to a person up at the top of the tower, which he would in turn, he would give it to the information air boss. Say, hey, sir, this wire is not available. We're gonna have to strip it, which basically means we have to take it offline. So if something like that happens, they're in constant communications with the pilots. So they tell the pilot, to not land, and also the pilots, their systems, they can pick up on. There's a light at the back of the ship, which is green and red and stuff like that. So I don't know too much. I know that's a lot more like the interior communications and stuff like that. But they have a way of knowing. As soon as if we say something is wrong to not land, they get that message to, like you mentioned, to wave off, either pull up or whatever the case may be.
So you have to make that decision like instantly, right?
We do. Yes, sir. Like I mentioned, those computer systems, there is fault codes. There are certain codes that if something pops up, it's a critical fault that has to be where the wire has to be taken off, something that we can't fix. And when it comes to that, when you're middle of flight operations, you can't fix that equipment. So you might start the day with four wires, catch an aircraft, and then you might end up down to 1 or 2. It all kind of depends on the equipment, because I think these ships they're old. The ship that I was on, the Eisenhower, I think she's currently 44, 45 years old. So a lot of this equipment has taken a beating over the years and either been replaced and stuff like that. So there are some times where the equipment becomes unavailable, and you have to fix it that night, and hopefully get it prepared for the next day for these pilots to land, because ultimately they're a lot more comfortable with four wires on the floor than 1 or 2, because if there's only 1 or 2, that's a small margin of landing that they get, and if they don't land on the wire, they touch and go, and they have to do a complete circle back around to try and land again. So if our equipment's not up and running and all the wires are online, it makes the job a lot harder for the pilots to land consistently. Because you don't want them to go up in the air and you run out of fuel, whatever mission they're coming back. So now we have to send up another, the catapults have to send up another, fueler jet to go up there to fuel a jet to, if our equipment's messed up. So there's a lot of different things that could go wrong. So our equipment, like you were saying earlier, our job is it's really essential. It really is, because one little thing could go wrong, and it makes a lot of things in the back end, follow suit, where other things get put on hold until our stuff's fixed.
It's that huge cascade of failures. One thing and happens somewhere else, and to me again, it's that you see the issue instantaneously. You have to react. Your training has to be dead on. Everybody else has to be dead on. You can't have a downtime. You can't not pay attention, right? So the demands for this, cadets, are tremendous, right? Because it's not just, oh, sorry, I forgot, right? I mean, there's lives associated with this. So this is serious. This is not a joke whatsoever. The picture on the bottom right of those two guys walking on that arresting cable, and even the person in the upper left. I mean, you guys get pretty filthy, all right? So you're stuck on a ship, right? I don't know if our cadets understand the concept of a Navy shower, but what's that like? Because you have to have downtime, because you can't stay up on the deck at this level of intensity for months. You have to have downtime. So what is that like when you get off duty?
Yes, sir. So like I mentioned, we do run two different crews. We have a day crew and a night crew. So basically, the day crew, let's say your flight operations are 10 a.m. to 10 p.m. So the day crew is waking up 2 hours before to come in, make sure everything's good to go. They're checking all the equipment prior to flight operations, and then during the flight operation, they maintain all the equipment and operate throughout the day. At conclusion at 10 p.m., the other crews coming in, they basically do the what we call post-op. Basically check everything and any maintenance that needs to be done, either the PMS or just if something is broke that has to be fixed, they come in and fix that. So basically, it's kind of like a hot handoff. The first crew, when they do get that downtime, you're looking anywhere from 4 to 8. I wouldn't say 8 hours, because a lot of the times, I mean, our rate in particular, we're working 15 to 17-hour days, which it seems like a lot, but the job that we do requires that, because we have to be up for the entire flight operations, and then our equipment has to be fixed and maintained. You just can't go off a wing with it. So at the end of the day, you do get that a little bit of time to choose what you want to do. I mean, everyone goes and showers. Something that the other downfall is at night. At the end of the night, there's 10 times where I'm taking cold showers. There's times where I'm taking hot showers. It's a kind of swing and miss. It just depends on, are people up top with, washing aircraft or something like that, where there's not enough water supply, for us to take showers. So sometimes you're waiting a little bit longer just to take a shower before you can go to bed. Because I personally, I hate going to bed dirty. So no matter what it was, I was waiting for some type of shower to, so I can, end my day. But there's when you're out to sea, there's really no single, I got one full day off. You're working 7 days a week, the entire time. There's not gonna, there is time for, do some studying and definitely time to sleep and stuff like that. But on a normal day, like I mentioned, we're 15 to 17 hours on most days while there's flight operations.
So let's go back to close to the beginning here. Is why did you choose this rate?
So
now you have a better experience. You know what it's like, right? So hopefully you chose wisely. Choose your rate, choose your fate. But at the same time, what gravitated you towards this?
To be honest, sir, it was nothing in particular. So when I did come in, like I mentioned, my dad gave me a lot of information. So I personally was looking for something to benefit me in the long run. I initially came in, was the only one to do the 4 years, get the education credits and stuff like that, get something valuable and get out. So I initially was coming in to be like an electrician's mate, something, maybe a plumber, something like that would benefit me outside. But when it came time to it, I did qualify for those rates, but they were not available. So I got a select amount of jobs, which was the ABE, ABH, ABF. I think I got cook on a sub, and one or two others. So when the list was provided to me, I actually was sitting down with the detailer and was asking me, what out of these rates might benefit me in the long run. So with with ABE, so there's a lot of hydraulics and steam and other things like that. So it correlates to John Deere, catapults, other big machinery, elevating companies and the cities and stuff like that. So there was a a little bit that incited me to pick the ABE over H and Fs, because H and Fs, you're moving aircraft, fueling them, and you're not going to have much job. That's not going to correlate much on the outside, as maybe if you're working at an airport. So I chose the ABE rate for that, just so it would kind of help me have something in the long run, but then also because it was the one that left the quickest, because I was ready to, start my career. I only had to wait 3 or 4 months before I shipped out to boot camp. So 2 little different factors that made me choose it, but it wasn't one of my first choices. But the first 5 years with it definitely have some memories. It taught me hard work, and you meet a lot of people for sure.
It's fantastic. All right, great, thank you. So I'm looking over some of the additional questions that were posted by the cadets. Cadets, if you have more things you'd like to ask, please put them in the window, and we'll see if we can read them off. How are we doing with slides? Are we near the end?
So yes, we have one more slide. Our executive officer here in TAC Philadelphia actually wanted us to just put this little time-lapse video here. It's actually I believe it's a Theodore Roosevelt, if I remember right, actually transiting through the Suez Canal out in the Middle East. So if you could start the video, please.
That was so cool.
Nimitz.
MC1 Quinlan, did you film this? Was this one of yours?
No, sir. Never deployed with Nimitz.
Okay. That is pretty amazing stuff to see an aircraft carrier go through the middle of a desert. on a waterway. So Petty Officer Ritchie, that brings me to another question is, okay, so, just having to do with physical security of the carrier, all right? So you're so busy in flight operations and all the maintenance stuff you're talking about and all those hours. Did you stand watch? And did you have to do any of the other type of security stuff that, say, some of your other shipmates would do on the carrier?
When it came to this, sir, no. So they shut down basically, for the most part, everything. They turn off, the water supply and stuff like that to get through. But there are the gunner's mates and stuff like that who do stand watch. As you see here, there's two sides. You have two countries on each side. One is Egypt, and I don't remember the other one. I want to say it's Saudi Arabia, but I'm not 100% on that one. But when you're going through this canal, they literally have little trucks on each side, from these countries. They're constantly watching what your ship is doing. You can go on the flight deck. They just don't want people up there the entire time. You can, it's something you want to see. So you can be out on the catwalks, on the flight decks and stuff like that. The second time I went through it, I actually was in the middle of a qualification board. But the first time, I took some photos and stuff like that. But you literally can see trucks on the on either side, just kind of moving the same speed of the ship, just watching what we're doing, just seeing if we're going to do anything. But all the entire fleet goes through this this little canal. So we don't all go up at once. You don't want to do that. So that we might float out, waiting for our turn to go in, because the ships get deployed with a certain amount of ships and stuff like that. So we each kind of take our turns to go through these canals. But as far as myself, I didn't have any watches or anything like that. So it was kind of one of those few moments where we had a little bit of downtime while we're transiting through here.
Great. And it's probably really hot too, right?
It's definitely warm, especially when you get overseas. That's the other thing with with the flight deck. It can be very, very hot even at night. It's hot over there for sure. So you're constantly moving, constantly sweating. Even at, like I said, at night, it's you're still looking mid-90s or anything above that, for sure.
Fantastic. So you get a good workout every single day, all the time, never stop.
Correct.
Okay. Very nice.
And that's the end of the slides.
Great. So cadets, as I was reading through your comments and questions, most of those, if not all of them, were answered through the presentation. So I think that Petty Officer Ritchie did an outstanding job going through those inadvertently, because you were in sync with what he was talking about and vice versa. So, Petty Officer Ritchie, I really want to thank you for, doing this presentation today. It gave me a much better feel and an additional level of respect for what happens on the flight deck and what it takes for the very special men and women that take on that job. It's hazardous. It's not for the weak, but if it's not being done right, I mean, there is no second option. So, hats off to you and to your shipmates for doing this. It's really a fantastic thing. And thank you for sharing it with us in the Naval Sea Cadet Corps. Truly appreciate it.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for having me.
So, cadets, again, there will be that quiz, which will be available after the video is over. So give it a few moments for the posting to take place. If you enjoyed this presentation, give us a thumbs up. Always appreciate that. And we will be having additional episodes of Real Sailors, Real Sea Stories coming up shortly. So stay tuned. Hope you enjoy it. And everybody have a great evening. Thanks a lot for attending.
Thank you, sir.